guess it's fair to say that all angels, pretty much all of them, I guess, are in the same sense called watchers. So, what does an angel do? He watches over the affairs of man, or angels are sent to watch over individuals. They are watching over great nations, they are watching over the world. And you read so many accounts of visitations here via angels. And really, though they're not called watchers when you read of all of them, you would say really that they do in fact watch over the affairs of men and make decisions in accordance with whatever they gather from their observations, let's say. So they are largely sent, or they dwell in the spiritual world, in the other realm, watching over the affairs of man. And some, of course, cross over here. Well, the fact that these angels watch over us in compassion, looking out for you, looking after you, or watching over great nations, or watching over the whole world, and then making decisions in accordance with that, the course of this world, and the usually there's a big intervention regarding when the sins of a said nation or a said person, the cup is full. And then there's often a very big intervention. So it appears that they're very much hands off, though of course they're hands on, and they're watchers, watching over you, watching over me, watching over the affairs of the whole world. And now, when you look at these various angels, and let's go with, say, Jude referred to the angels which you read of in Genesis chapter 6. Now, Genesis chapter 6 talks of fallen angels. Now, you could say they're watching over the affairs of man, in that it came to pass, over in Genesis chapter 6, and it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God, now the sons of God here are created beings of God. An angel is a created being of God, therefore he's a son of God. So it came to pass, so time goes by, in other words, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them. Now, here's the sons of God, right? These are created beings of God. In other words, angels of God, created by God. Therefore, they are sons of God, created beings. That the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Now, here's the sons of God. They're looking over, watching over, presiding over the affairs of man. But these ones here are fallen sons of God, fallen angels of God. And of course, their dwelling is in the spiritual dimension. But these appear and do, of course, as we read, make the cross over from that dimension into this dimension. Somehow or other, they were manifest in a physical way, so much so that they even married, they took of them wives, saw the daughters of men, that they were fair to look upon, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Now, verse 3 is interesting because it says, and the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man. So man had reached the point back then when these angels, let's say, saw the daughters of men that they were fair to look upon, well, the impression you get, well, evil was obviously running rampant, so much so that these angels in the spirit world saw that the daughters of men were fair to look upon. They were kind of, in a lot of ways, the daughters of men were actually up for this. They're up for it, as we say. And so they took of them as many wives as they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit, which shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Now, flesh here means lust. So what you've got is these angels in the spirit world looking at the daughters of men and lusting after them. And what you've got also is the daughters of men lusting after these angels too. So they were up for it. It was fair game. The daughters of men had reached the point where they were willing, they were up for it, they were willing to cohabit with these fallen angels. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. In other words, he's to blame here too. It's not just the fallen angels. Man had reached the point, and women on this occasion, man being mankind, women of mankind, right? So we're talking mankind, man and women, really. When we talk about mankind, we mean men and women, mankind. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Now there comes a point where suddenly these watchers, they watch over the affairs of man, and suddenly man reaches tipping point, and so the watchers are visualized in one dream of Nebuchadnezzar, interpreted by Daniel as having a form of symbolic axe, and so cutting down the tree. So Genesis really is talking about the fall of man and the great flood. And the great flood, what actually brought it in was these sons of God that saw the daughters of men that they were fair to look upon. And God saying, my spirit will not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. In other words, he's also to blame. You can't just simply point at the fallen angels and say it's just them. You can't just point at these watchers who are watching over the affairs of men and sees the daughters of men that they were fair to look upon. Well, fair to look upon, you might think of a nice, fair maiden. But actually, these women were up for it, and therefore these fallen angels took of them wives as many as they chose. And God's saying, for that he also is flesh. In other words, man also is lust, yet his days shall be 120 years. So man's got back then 120 years to change his ways, so quite a long time. But in God's eyes, 120 years is, of course, a short time. A day of the Lord is like unto 1,000 years. So if a day with the Lord is like unto 1,000 years, then 120 years is only a tenth of that, which would actually, in God's eyes, be a very short time, but in our time, a very long time. And time enough for man to change his ways. He's reached the tipping point whereby women are also up for it, in that they are lusting after these sons of God. And these sons of God crossing over into this realm and marrying the daughters of men, and indeed giving them children. And it goes on to talk about there were giants in the earth in those days, so these children seem to grow quite large. And also after that, when the sons of God came in other words, had sex unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became the mighty men which were of old, men of renown. So these children grew to be the great men of the earth, having great influence, and became men of renown. So quite an evil influence on mankind is coming in via these sons of God that left their habitation and crossed over here. They, of course, in this same sense, would have been watchers watching over the affairs of man and seeing these daughters of men, that they were up for it, let's say, using that They were as very much as bad as they were. In other words, he also his flesh means man is up for it. Man is reached that tipping point where his lusts are running rampant, and so these fallen angels coming to earth. Well, Jude talks about the same. And he's saying, and the angels which kept not their first estate, in other words, their estate, their place, was to watch over man, to help mankind, if as from the spirit world, as from that realm and not this realm. And so he's talking here in Jude, verse 6, chapter 1, only one chapter, verse 6. And the angels which kept not their first estate, in other words, their main role in life and their place was in the spirit world, watching over the affairs of man to help man. But these watching over the affairs of man and conspiring against man, and man reaching tipping point, he also is flesh in that mankind reached the point where women were even ready to cohabit with these fallen angels, which were indeed going to cross over from the spirit world into this world. And so we had quite a rapid increase in evil running rampant in this world. God giving mankind 120 years to change his ways. And then the flood would come, and in the meantime, you had Noah building an ark and the world. Even back then, propaganda would have got out, and word would have got out that there's this nutcase building this ark, talking about the end of the world, which he, in that same sense, would have been classed as a kind of a conspiracy theorist, a prepper, or someone wearing a tin hat, as they call them now. So Jude here talking of the same, and he's talking of these fallen angels, which no doubt were watching over the affairs of man, but for evil. They saw the daughters of men, so they're watching these daughters of men, and they were fair to look upon. You could say they were fair game. And the angels which kept not, so verse 6, and the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation. So this is what Jude here is talking about, these fallen angels. Their habitation is in the spirit world, but they leave the spirit world and come to this world, cross over here into this world, and to marry daughters of men and to give them children, and these children would be the great influential men of the earth. And so mankind became more and more evil as a result of this evil influence that was in the world back then, coming in via these sons of God. And the angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation in the spirit world, he have reserved. So what happened to these? He have reserved in everlasting chains, under darkness, unto the judgment of the great day. So it's fair to say that these angels are still reserved in chains to this day. The flood would have been thousands of years ago, of course. And these angels have been reserved in chains under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. Well, that's talking about those angels that crossed over here. Still reserved in chains under darkness, reserved in everlasting chains. The chains are everlasting, under darkness unto the judgment of the great day. And then he goes on, even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner. So again, you had an evil influence behind Sodom and Gomorrah as coming from the spirit world. It didn't quite, if you read the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, it doesn't quite talk of these fallen angels as being manifest in the earth then, marrying the daughters of men. But it does talk of other angels that crossed over from the spirit world into this world, which are indeed good angels. You could again call these watchers, even as so he goes on, even as Sodom and Gomorrah having an evil influence behind them. and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication. So it wasn't just gay sex that was running rampant, also fornication was running rampant, if we read further. Giving themselves over to fornication and going after strange flesh. So going after strange flesh would be men going after men, and strange flesh regarding the angels would be angels being their bodies being more angelic, let's say, in they being created beings, the sons of God, but having a different form of body than a human body. But still, they leaving the spirit world and marrying these daughters of men would be going after strange flesh. So contrary to, let's say, nature, God creates various creatures of this earth. Contrary to nature, it wouldn't be right for a man to sleep with a monkey and so on. It's contrary. It's going after strange flesh, though, of course, this happens even these days. Back then, you hear stories of how so many creatures were crossed with each other. And so going after strange flesh could have broader and wider and deeper implications. But Jude here talking about these fallen angels leaving their first estate, even as Sodom and Gomorrah, and the angels was kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation in the spirit world. He have reserved in everlasting chains under darkness, unto the judgment of the great day. So still in chains, everlasting chains, under darkness, to this day. In other words, still imprisoned to this day. Even as Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities about them in like manner, giving themselves over to fornication. So we all talk about Sodom and Gomorrah, we think, oh, it's talking about homosexuals and gay sex, etc. But also there was fornication running rampant. Well, Jesus said that in the last days it would be like Sodom and Gomorrah. And so what was also running rampant was also fornication and going after strange flesh. So in other words, going after, contrary to nature, men going after strange flesh, and set forth for an example, suffering the vengeance of eternal fire. Well, things got so bad back then. Now, it's interesting when you read of Lot and Abraham had came out of his country and was sojourning in the wilderness, let's say, and he goes with his brother's son Lot. Now these they pretty much looked after sheep, so they were shepherds. So Lot had his flock, let's say, and his people with him, his servants. Abraham had his servants and his sheep, and these ended up arguing. And so Abraham said, look, it's not good that we all end up arguing. That's so often the case, I'm afraid. Again, arguments breaking out even back then. Let's just split up. Now you go wherever you choose to go, and I'll go on wherever you don't go, kind of like. So Lot says, look, I'm going to go down there near Sodom and Gomorrah, because the green grass there looks lush and everything looks good for my flock. And so in short, they parted, and Lot goes down to somewhere near Sodom and Gomorrah. It doesn't appear that he was actually in Sodom and Gomorrah at that point. He was somewhere near, pointing towards Sodom and Gomorrah, and he chose the lush green grass. Now, Lot really was famous for being a form of a compromiser, whereas Abraham was more famous for going all the way with God and was a good man, a just man, and a good, if you want a yardstick in life. As a good example, well, you're looking at Abraham as opposed to Lot being a more of a compromiser, as opposed to Abraham holding up the true yardstick of and setting a good example and walking in all of God's ways. Well, Lot appears to have got sucked in that first he chooses the lush green grass, somewhere down there near Sodom and Gomorrah. So this is important, really, because you kind of feel sorry for Lot. And maybe we're in awe of Abraham. Now, these days, it's pretty much getting like it was back then in the days of Lot, with Sodom and Gomorrah, that is, and in the days of these fallen angels coming to earth and cohabiting with women and marrying them, and mankind, he also is flesh, so he's up for all of this. Well, Lot, let's say Abraham was a very compassionate person, and he obviously was very wise, and rather than argue, they decided to split. But Lot, of course, choosing the lush green grass, it does say take the lower seat, he takes the higher seat. And so he chooses the lush green grass. Snag was, it was somewhere near Sodom and Gomorrah. So he goes down there and kind of is kind of compromising right there. Lot really is famous for compromising, whereas Abraham is more famous for walking in all of God's ways. But Abraham not being so condemning and damning of Lot, but being more compassionate towards Lot. And it was largely Abraham's prayer that actually saved Lot, as it would turn out. Well, again, you've got, let's say, watchers. Now, it doesn't always call angels watchers, but personally, I think it's fair to say that all angels are watchers. And you would have an angel watching over you. Now, it's a pretty much a phrase that we all use. Maybe his angel was watching over him that day and kept him safe. So there would be, and there are indeed, angels, if not an angel, that's appointed to be with you and is watching over you. So I think it's fair to say that all angels are watchers, watching over the affairs of man, watching over individuals, and some of them are appointed to be even with you. Well, these fallen angels, of course, as we just read, watching over the affairs of man and sees the daughters of men that they're fair to look upon, and they're the fallen angels, and they're now reserved in chains, everlasting chains unto darkness. But they're not all fallen angels. There are, of course, other angels that watch over the affairs of man. And these were watching over not only Abraham, but also over, so they could watch over individuals like Abraham, as it turns out. But they also watch over the affairs of cities, great countries, watching over the affairs of Sodom and Gomorrah. And in Sodom and Gomorrah, of course, you had Lot and his children. And Lot didn't just have two daughters. It appears he had lots of daughters, and he just had married other men. No doubt in Sodom and Gomorrah, and these were getting sucked in. And Lot, of course, is famous for compromising. So, well, let's first see what these angels are like. And first, they visit Abraham, and of course, they're watching over Abraham. They're watching over the affairs of the whole world. And Abraham and his children, his lineage, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and their children, and so on. It so happens that the Messiah was going to come in through the children of Abraham. And so God watching over the affairs of man, these angels visit Abraham. One of them appears to be the Lord, so is indeed Jesus. So Jesus was made flesh in the New Testament, but somehow or other he appears to Abraham in the Old Testament. And it appears that he has these two angels with him, and so he goes down first to talk to Abraham with a view of the whole world from the beginning to the end, in that later on, in thousands of years later, the Messiah would indeed be born as coming in through the children of Abraham. Children would have children, would have children, have children, and so on. Eventually Mary would come in of the lineage of King David, and she also would have a child, and that child would be the Messiah. would be the saviour of the whole world. So these angels and the Lord with them, two angels with the Lord, appearing as men, as it says, appearing first to Abraham, and telling him that he's going to indeed have a son. And this is obviously important because eventually Jesus would be born of the same lineage. So you can see their focus and their vision in watching over the affairs of man, that all nations of the earth would indeed be blessed when Jesus came in through the children of Abraham. And Abraham setting a good example, but Lot not being such a good example, but famous for compromising. Well, to cut it short, these angels, they appear to be able to eat, and these angels show up first to Abraham. The Lord appeared unto him, right, talking about Abraham, chapter 18 of Genesis. And the Lord appeared unto him, unto Abraham, in the plains of Mamre, and he sat in the tent in the heat of the day. So he's going about, you've got Abraham here going about his daily business. He sat by his tent where he resided. He had a tent. And he's roaming around in the wilderness, and he's a shepherd with all these sheep. Lot's gone his way. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. Now these are, this is the Lord, this is Jesus, crossing over from the spirit world into this world with these 2 angels. And so they're made manifest in that they are pretty much physical, like you and me. So they can, you might say, they can kind of materialise if they choose. Well, these clearly chose to materialise, as did, if you want to use that phrase, as did the fallen angels that saw the daughters of man. But these, of course, good angels, and actually with Jesus. Interesting when you read the writings of Daniel, how again there's 3 appearing to Daniel. One stood on the river, appears to be walking on water on the river, and 2 either side. So you think, well, maybe Jesus crosses over quite a lot of times into this world, has done in the Old Testament, as of course in the New he's made flesh. So it's not a short matter, not a hard thing for Jesus to cross over. He walked with Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, it says. So no doubt, even then, appearing as physical as you and me, you do wonder. So it's not a small thing for Jesus to cross over from the spirit world into this world, and these angels, of course, crossing over with him, and these again watching over the affairs of man, watching over Abraham and watching over the affairs of man with a view to the future, in that the Messiah is going to come out of the children of Abraham. So Abraham lifts up his eyes. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and lo, 3 men stood by him. And when he saw them, he ran to meet them. So he's in the wilderness here, ran to meet them from the tent door, and bowed himself toward the ground and said, "My Lord." So it's got a capital L there. We're talking Jesus. "My Lord, if now I have found favour in thy sight, pass not away, I pray thee, from thy servant." And this is interesting because these can eat, which makes them appear as being more physical. So they cross from the spirit world. They've left their habitation, but they're not wishing to dwell with mankind. They're simply visiting man. So they can clearly manifest and appear as physical as you and me. So what does Abraham do? He says, "Let a little water, I pray you. Let a little water, I pray, be fetched, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree." So he goes to get some water for these men. They appear as men. Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for some have entertained angels unawares. "And I will fetch a morsel of bread." So Abraham's going to get a morsel of bread, "and comfort ye your hearts. After that ye shall pass on." So look, I'm going to give you something nice to eat, and you can then go your way. Well, going their way, they obviously had major things to do and talk about with Abraham, earth-shaking things. These are the more kind of earth-shaking events as coming from these watchers, you would say, including the Lord himself watching over the affairs of man. For therefore are ye come to your servant, and they said, so do as thou hast said. And Abraham hastened into the tent unto Sarah, and said, make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes upon the hearth. And Abraham ran unto the herd and fetched a calf tender and good, and gave it unto a young man, and he hastened to dress it. So he gets this calf ready to eat. And he took butter and milk and the calf which he had dressed, and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree, and they did eat. So he stood under a tree, and they're eating. So they're very much physical in that they can eat. So it's not unusual, it would appear, for these angels to cross over into this realm and appear as physical as you and me, though as a rule they generally don't, but they can do. So after this meeting first with Abraham, and telling him he's going to have a son, because this son would eventually have other children, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob would have 12 children, and they would have children eventually. These various kings would come out of, in this same sense, Abraham's loins. You would have all these various, you'd have Solomon, you'd have King David, various prophets that would come out of his, of the children of Israel. So they then leave Abraham, and the Lord said, so let's see, let's go to here. So after this meeting with Abraham, and the men rose up from thence and looked toward Sodom, right? So we're talking now Sodom and Gomorrah. And Abraham went with them to bring them on the way. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I shall do, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. So in other words, all the nations of the earth blessed in Abraham meant Jesus was going to come. So Jesus didn't come just for the children of Israel. He came for the whole world. Yes, he was born through the lineage of Abraham's children. But seeing that Abraham, verse 18 here, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. You see, so their earth-shaking events, eventually the Messiah would come out of Abraham's loins, so to speak. For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord to do justice and judgment, and the Lord, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken. So Abraham was a very good example of everything we should all be. But let's face it, we all fall so many times short. And maybe when we look at Abraham, and he's such a good example, and it kind of makes you quiver and shake, could I ever be such a good example as Abraham? Or do I feel the same kind of compassion that Abraham had for Lot? Maybe you relate better to Lot than you do to Abraham. Because we all make so many mistakes, and we all fall so many times short. And this is really important these days, because we can, of course, all pray for each other, no matter whether we relate better to Abraham or whether we relate better to Lot, the one who is always compromising and falling short, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. And if we're to be honest, we look at ourselves and we think, what a wreck I am, what a mess I am. I make so many mistakes and I fall so many times short. Well, you kind of feel you're walking better with Lot sometimes than you do with Abraham. Abraham was obviously a very good example, and Lot was not, but it was Abraham's prayers that saved Lot. So the Lord is leaving Abraham. He's finished that mission there. He's telling Abraham he's going to have a son, even though Abraham was 100 years old and his wife was 90 years old, as I remember. So quite a miracle there. And that son would have children, so on the Messiah would come. So that mission was kind of over. And indeed, Abraham, as the Lord said, did have a son the next year, and that son was obviously Isaac. And so the Lord said, behold, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see. So see whether they have done altogether according to the cry of it, which is come unto me. And if not, I will know it. So the Lord watching over the affairs of man. And these angels with him. These two angels with him, you would say, also watching over, not just watching over Abraham, an individual, and Sarah, an individual, and they go and have a child, but also watching over great nations such as Sodom and Gomorrah. And the men turn their faces from thence. So you picture, right, they finished their mission with Abraham. They're now on their way to Sodom and Gomorrah. And the men turned their faces from thence and went towards Sodom. So they're going towards Sodom. So you think, well, look, but Abraham stood yet before the Lord. So Abraham seems to pull the Lord aside. One of them is Jesus. He pulls him aside and wants to have a little chat with him, and not just a chat, an important conversation, which really would be a form of a prayer. And you can actually converse with Jesus. Prayers don't have to be so supercilious and serious and sanctimonious, though of course they are, of course, serious. This was serious because he was worried about his brother's son Lot. So in the same sense, he's simply having a conversation with the Lord, and he's concerned, he's compassionate towards Lot. He knows Lot tends to get sucked in a lot and is compromiser and all this, so he cares for him and wants to make sure he's going to be okay. The Lord is going down to Sodom and Gomorrah. In fact, these two angels go down to Sodom and Gomorrah to check the place out, as watchers, you would say. And the men turned their faces from thence and went towards Sodom, but Abraham stood before the Lord. And Abraham drew near and said, wilt thou also destroy the righteous with the wicked? So he's praying here, he's talking to the Lord, simply having a conversation with the Lord concerning Lot. And of course it is a serious conversation. It's not sanctimonious, they've kind of stood there. And you picture them kind of stood on a hill looking over Sodom. And these two angels appear to be somewhat on their way, whilst the Lord is pulled aside by Abraham. And Abraham's concerned, and Abraham drew near and said, what wilt thou destroy the righteous with the wicked? Peradventure there be 50 righteous in the city, wilt thou also destroy, wilt thou also destroy and not spare and the place for the 50 righteous that are therein? That be far from thee to do that after this manner, to slay the righteous with the wicked, that the righteous should be as the wicked, that be far from thee. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? And the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sake. And Abraham goes on, if there be 5 and 50 and so on, he brings it down to about 10. And he said unto him, oh, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Peradventure there shall be 30, and so on. He brings it down to 10, and let not the Lord be angry if I speak this once. Peradventure 10 shall be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for 10's sake. So if there are 10 righteous men found in that city, in Sodom and Gomorrah, then God, the Lord, wouldn't destroy it. And the Lord went his way as soon as he had left, communing with Abraham, and Abraham returned unto his place. So the Lord's going about his mission here, and he appears to send these two angels, these two watchers, down to Sodom and Gomorrah to see if it's as bad as the cry of it says. And so chapter 19, and there came two angels. So these two angels that were with the Lord, right, are going down to Sodom and Gomorrah. And there came two angels to Sodom at even, so at night time. And Lot sat in the gate of the city of Sodom. And Lot seeing them, so it's kind of like the end of the day, and Lot seeing them rose up to meet them, and he bowed himself with his face toward the ground. And he said, Behold, now my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house and tarry all night. So it's night time. He says, look, you need somewhere to stay. They're clearly strangers. They hadn't been seen in that city before. And they are obviously physically made manifest. And they are, again, you'd say, they've crossed over from the spirit world to this world, and they're as physical as you and me, because everyone can see them. Lot can see them. The people of the city can see them, and they're watchers. They're sent to see exactly what it's like down there in Sodom and Gomorrah. It's interesting when you read of Lot, first when he went down there, yes, it was a wicked place. But you kind of picture their sins hadn't, their cup of iniquity wasn't quite full when Lot first went down to Sodom and Gomorrah. Well, time goes by and that cup becomes full. And you picture these days, you wonder where all of this is going to end up, and this paints a fair picture as to why God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Because often things were not as bad as they are when these angels finally went down into Sodom and Gomorrah. So these are kind of watcher angels. They're watching over the affairs of man. And the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah, so there appears to be a lot of suffering going on down there in Sodom and Gomorrah. And the cry has reached unto God's ears, unto the Lord's ears. So he sends these angels down into Sodom and Gomorrah. Let's see what happens when they go down into Sodom and Gomorrah. And let's see how bad things have got, how the cry is obviously great. There's a lot of suffering going on there. And what is this suffering all about? How bad has things got? It probably wasn't quite this bad, though it was bad when Lot went down there to reside there in Sodom and Gomorrah. But time has rolled on, and things have reached the cup of iniquity is now full. So how bad did all of this get? And he said, Behold, so these angels appear, and they're walking around like any other man. He said, Behold, now my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house, and tarry all night, and wash your feet, and ye shall rise up early, and go your ways. And they said, Nay, but we will abide in the streets all night. They want to watch the city and see what happens. They're down there as watchers. They're watching over Sodom and Gomorrah, and they want to see if it's as bad as they as the cry would obviously suggest and say. And so Lot pressed them. Let's see how this course of event plays out. Well, they're down there as watchers, and you've got Lot who's, look, we want to reside in the street. We're going to check this place out. Just see how bad things have got. And a good time to do this is often at night. Sin is often more rampant at night, as so much goes on under the cover of night. And he pressed them greatly, and they turned in unto him. And in the end, they turned in and entered into his house. And he made them a feast, so they appeared to be able to eat again. He did bake unleavened bread, and they did eat. But before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round. Well, let's see how this course of event plays out. Both old and young. So the whole city appears to have seen these men come into the city, new visitors to the city. They'd never seen them before. Everyone gets wind that these two strangers have come into the city. So what are they going to do? Greet them in and be kind to them, as Lot obviously was, giving them a place to sleep for the night and giving them a meal? No, they had other things in their mind and heart. So, but before they lay down, right, they're about to go to sleep. So it's kind of late at night. You're picturing here, it's getting on after 10 o'clock, whenever you go to sleep, getting towards midnight perhaps. And the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, can pass the house round, both old and young. So both old and young, the whole city coming out to these men. What do they want? All the people from every quarter, men, young and old. And they called unto Lot and said unto him, where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. Know them, know in the Bible means know them. So-and-so knew his wife and they had a son. So know means that we might know them. In other words, have sex with them. So they want to rape these men. This is how bad it got in Sodom and Gomorrah. It started off, obviously it was bad and it was wicked and it was wrong. But time went by and the sin and the lust and the cup of iniquity being full was running rampant in Sodom and Gomorrah. And the cry of it, the suffering that was induced to the people there via mass rape, you would say, and violation of people's human rights and so on. And these two men visiting the city, where are the men which came in to thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them, that we may have sex with them. This is how bad it got. And Lot went out at the door unto them and shut the door after him. So he's outside of the city, he's trying to communicate with these men and talk them out of it. Look, you don't want to rape these men. You don't want to violate them. And said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. Now, this is how wicked it got. This is why God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And I'm sure everyone would agree that this is in no way good. It is wicked, as it says, it's wicked. You got a whole city of men, young and old, coming out to these two strangers that are coming to town. Why? To violate and rape them. That's how bad it got. So, and said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. Behold, now I have two daughters. Now here's Lot compromising. He's panicking here. He's using his own carnal thinking, his own carnal mind. And what was he thinking of? But now I have two daughters which have not known men. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you. And do ye to them as good as in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore came they under the shadow of my roof. They haven't come here to do evil to you. And they said, stand back. And they said again, this one fellow came in to sojourn. So they're saying to Lot, stand back. They want to get in the house and drag these men out and rape them. That's what it's saying, and I'm simply telling it like it is. And they said, stand back. And they said again, this one fellow, talking of Lot, came into sojourn, and he will needs be a judge. So they obviously, who are you to come into this? So you, Lot, you came here as a stranger into Sodom. What was he even doing in Sodom and Gomorrah now? He obviously got sucked in. He went down towards Sodom and Gomorrah, you read earlier on. But now he's actually residing in Sodom and Gomorrah, so he's sucked in. Again, compromise. This one fellow came into sojourn, and he will needs be a judge. Now will we deal worse with thee than with them. So they're going to rape Lot. You picture Lot's an older man. And they press sore upon the man, even Lot. So they want to drag Lot out there, rape him, and then rape these other two angels, and came near to break down the door. But the men, now here's these watchers, but the men, these two angels, but the men put forth their hand and pulled Lot into the house to them and shut to the door. And they smote the men that were at the door of the house with blindness, both small and great, so that they wearied themselves to find the door. So you've got the whole town of people here smitten with blindness, so they weary themselves to find the door. So I guess these eventually gave up and went back home. And the men said unto Lot, Hast thou here any besides son-in-law and thy sons and thy daughters? And whatsoever thou hast in the city, bring them out of this place, for we will destroy this place. This is how evil it got. Not quite the gay couple that lived next door and all this sort of stuff, the quiet couple, but sin running rampant. This is how bad it got in Sodom and Gomorrah. For we will destroy this place, because the cry of them is waxen great before the face of the Lord, and the Lord has sent us to destroy it. You can see why God would destroy it, and no one can disagree here unless you advocate mass rape. Well, no one advocates mass rape. You would have to disagree. You'd have to agree that the Lord was just in destroying Sodom and Gomorrah, that the sin had become so great, and no one's going to condone that kind of lifestyle. And this is exactly how bad it got, and paints a fair picture as to why God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, how bad the sin had become, and how rampant it had become. So the Lord have sent us to destroy it. And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters. So he's got other daughters, and he has sons-in-laws. And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-laws. The angel said, look, if you got any others of your relatives that are, the relatives have no doubt been sucked in too. This is the problem again. You have a man's foes shall be they of his own household. And Lot went out and spake unto his sons-in-law, which married his daughters, and said, Up, get you out of this place, for the Lord will destroy this city. But he seemed as one that mocked unto his sons-in-law. So he didn't sound, you picture here, he didn't sound very convincing. So I guess he believed the angels. They were going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah and all this sort of thing. But he kind of he didn't quite speak with conviction here, and he didn't quite convince them. And they were no doubt sucked in anyway. So you think, wow, kind of a compromise again on Lot's behalf. But he seemed to one of them that mocked his sons-in-law. And when the morning arose, then the angels hastened Lot, saying, Arise, take thy wife and thy 2 daughters, which are with thee, which are here, lest thou be consumed in the iniquity of the city. Come on, you've got to get out of this place. You can't get sucked in like your relatives. Your relatives clearly are sucked in. There's nothing you can do for them. You've got to get out. And while he lingered, so compromise again, he's lingering. He should be running straight out. And while he lingered, so compromise again, the men had laid hold of his hand and upon the hand of his wife. So they literally had to drag them out. They're dragging them out under the strength, really, of Abraham's prayer. And upon the hand of his 2 daughters, so they actually get hold of Lot. Come on, you've got to get out of here. Lot's lingering around, perhaps pottering around the house to find his shirt or his tie or whatever he's looking for. No, just leave all that behind and get out. This place is it's iniquity, it's cup of iniquity, it's full, it's going to be destroyed. You've got to get out. And while he lingered, the men laid hold upon his hand, and upon the hand of his wife, and upon the hand of his 2 daughters, the Lord being merciful unto him. And they brought him forth and set him without the city. So they literally had to kind of drag him out. And it came to pass when they had brought them forth abroad, so they were pretty much getting hold of his hand so they can again physically made manifest and actually dragging him out, that he said, escape for thy life, look not behind thee. So the angel was saying, look not behind thee. Neither stay thou in all of the plain, escape to the mountain, get as far away as possible, lest thou be consumed. And Lot said unto them, Oh, not so, my Lord, behold, now thy servant hath found grace in thy sight, and thou hast magnified thy mercy. which thou hast showed unto me in saving my life. And I cannot escape to the mountain, lest some evil take me and I die. Behold, now this city is near to flee unto, and is a little one. Right, so it's again compromising again. The angels have said, get to the mountain. Oh, let me escape thither. Is it not a little one? It's just a small little compromise. Surely if I could go to this city, it'd be better. No, it wasn't such a good idea. You'd get sucked in again. But even so, the angels being merciful to him, even though it was a compromise again. And he said unto him, see, and the angel said unto him, see, I have accepted thee concerning this thing also, that I will not overthrow this city for the which thou hast spoken. Haste thee, escape thither, for I cannot do anything till thou come thither. Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. So the sun was risen upon the earth. So the sun is now risen, the sun's up. This is early hours of the morning, no doubt, escaping that city. While everyone else is asleep, they've gone back to their houses blinded by these angels. The sun was risen up upon the earth when Lot entered into Zoar. Then the Lord rained upon Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities, that which grew upon the ground. But his wife looked back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. His wife was no doubt kicking and screaming and hanging back, and though the angels were trying to pull them out, she insisting upon hanging back here, and was left in Sodom and Gomorrah in looking back. In other words, she was holding back from behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. And Abraham got up early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord, and looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and toward all the land and the plain, and beheld, and lo, the smoke of the country went up as the smoke of a furnace. And it came to pass, when God destroyed the cities of the plain, that God remembered Abraham. So Abraham's prayer had largely saved Abraham here. That God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities of the which Lot dwelt. So, though Lot very much was a righteous man, but was full of compromises, and Abraham here being very compassionate towards Lot and praying for him, and Abraham's prayer saving Lot. So, quite a powerful testimony of compassion, rather than damning your brother and your brethren, always bringing to mind and pointing out their sins. Yes, I'm sure the sins in all of us are so many, and so many pointing the finger at so many sins, and maybe the other three fingers pointing back at you. Can we point at each other's sins? Or should we be praying for each other like Abraham? Should we point at others' sins and condemn them and damn them just to prove you were right all along and you were so righteous and you were so good? Or should we be like just Abraham, praying for each other? And Abraham's prayer here, saving Lot, and these angels, indeed, these watchers, watching over the affairs of man, and the sin being so rampant. And the sin in this story, of course, everyone would have to agree, no matter who you are, whether you're gay or straight, let's say. The sin had become so bad and so manifest and so evil that mass rape of men raping men, was largely the cry of that city. Had become so great because of what was taking place as a result of the sins of that city. And so God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And this is the exact picture that the Bible paints, and also painting a picture of compassion. And even Jude, in the book of Jude, saying some having compassion like Abraham did, and pulling them out of the fire, rather than pointing and condemning and damning, being compassionate and doing our best to pull each other out of the fire, and no matter how many get so sucked in and compromise, why not pray for each other and not be so condemning and damning of each other? And maybe are you walking? You have more in common with Lot? Do you have more in common with Abraham? Is a question we should all ask ourselves. And God being merciful to Lot, God be merciful to us all. So Jesus, of course, is the mercy of God, and taking Jesus into our hearts means we have mercy. So praise Jesus.